Welcome to In Her Voice. My name is Kelly Covert, and I am passionate about helping women live authentically by listening to their inner voice. Get ready to be inspired by women of all walks of life that have set aside their should-bes and not good enoughs and are standing in their true voice, the voice of wisdom that each and every one of us has inside. Hello, and welcome to In Her Voice. I am Kelly Covert, and I am so glad that you press play today. You are not going to regret it. I have Amy E. Smith on the podcast today, and she calls herself, are you ready for it? The Joy Junkie. And I was like, as soon as I heard that, I was like, sign me up. I want to talk to you. Because what we're talking about today is finding your joy. And it is a really, really awesome conversation, and I can't wait to get to it. But really quick, first, I just want to remind you that In Her Voice is sponsored by Beauty Counter. Beauty Counter is a safer skincare and makeup company, and their mission is to put safer skincare into the hands of everyone. And they are doing big things on Capitol Hill in states to regulate what actually goes into skincare and makeup in our country, because you would be surprised that most of the things that you find on the shelves can't even be sold in other countries because of the ingredients that are in them. So if you are interested in maybe swapping out some of your current beauty care products for something safer, something that's going to be nourishing to you and support In Her Voice at the same time, I encourage you to check out the link, kellycovert.com/beauty, and you can learn more about Beauty Counter and see what they have to offer. And if you're not sure, you're like, I don't know even where I would begin, or I love the stuff that I have currently. Why is it bad for me? Reach out to me. I'd love to have a conversation with you about how we could bring safer products into your house and really empower you to take care of you in that way. So feel free to send me an email at kelly@kellycovert.com if you have questions, or if you're just not even sure where to start. And remember, anything that you purchase through the link, kellycovert.com/beauty, directly supports me and In Her Voice. And I just want to say thank you for doing that. Now, let me tell you about Amy. She's so great. Amy E. Smith is a certified confidence coach, masterful speaker, and personal empowerment expert. Founder of thejoyjunkie.com, Amy uses her roles as a coach, writer, podcaster, and speaker to move individuals to a place of radical personal empowerment and self-love. With acute focus on helping people find their voice, she is highly sought after for her uncommon style of irreverence, wisdom, and humor, and has been a featured expert on Fox 5 San Diego and yourtango.com. And you guys are going to get so much out of this conversation. Amy really shares some practical tips about diving down into what brings you joy and really starting to live a life that is centered around those things. So let's get right to the interview with Amy E. Smith. Amy Smith, I'm so excited to welcome you to In Her Voice. Thank you for being here today.
Oh, I've been looking forward to it all day.
Yes,
Thank you.
I have a huge smile on my face just by hearing your voice.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm loving your energy already. And so I want to start with this idea of joy. You call yourself the Joy Junkie, which I love.
Yeah. Thanks.
And I thought maybe our first question could be, what is joy for you? And what does joy for you feel like?
Ooh. Well, I think that a lot of what I do in the world and a lot of what I believe our problems could be solved by is if we actually addressed what was happening for us emotionally. And at its core, joy is an emotional state that we thrive in, right? And, we know from a psychological standpoint that as humans, we're always motivated by two primary drivers, either pursuit of pleasure or the avoidance of pain. So we're always kind of in this quest of what will make me feel good, right? And so we're always searching through these various means like garnering affection or approval from other people, like that will in turn lead to happiness. That must make me valuable. I know you talk a lot about worthiness. That surely will make me valid as a human if I kind of weigh a lot of my merit in all of these external forces instead of looking at what we have intrinsically and internally already, that we are wired for joy. And it's also a natural driver for us to want to reside in this place of happiness. I think where we get really skewed is in what brings us that joy, right? So there's things that we know for sure, like being with my, my child or something like that. For people listening might go, oh, being with my child always brings me joy. So we have these things that we know, we really listen to our inner voice and we go, okay, no, that's my intuition, really tapping into that element of this brings me fulfillment. And then there's that alternative voice that's, whatever you want to call it, the inner critic, the saboteur, that's telling you, no, you need to go find these people to approve of you, or you need to check off all these boxes in order to be happy. That's the path to happiness. So for me, I really looked at this idea that in our society, we are programmed and conditioned to be addicted to all sorts of things. What would shift if we actually wanted to be addicted to our own happiness and our own joy? And that's really how that kind of was born for me. I thought, my God, yes, this is how I want to reside, and to know that it's fleeting. We can't stay in that permanent state all the time. But my gosh, what a great focus for us.
Yeah, I love that, being addicted to joy instead of being addicted to affirmation externally or, merit, things like these external things that we think are going to bring us joy, like being addicted to our actual joy. So how did you realize and sort of come to terms with the fact that you weren't living a joyful life? Like, how, I think, this is kind of a weird question, but I think that some people are walking around and they think, well, this is just how it is for everybody.
Right.
How did you have that moment of like, yeah, no, I don't have to be living this way?
Oh, this is such a good question. It was such a poignant decision for me and chapter in my life. And this is probably probably approaching 15 years ago now. And I was, like many people, checking off the career box and working my way up in a prestige makeup brand, and had all the fancy big girl shit, right? Like the company car and the assistant and traveling all over. And at a really young age, I was in my early 20s and thinking, okay, this is the trajectory of my life. I kind of saw a lot of the succession planning and the ways that I was going to grow within this company. And I could really clearly see what was mapped out for me if I continued on that momentum. And I'll never forget, I had this one time I was driving home from one of my locations, consumed with work, checking in with my store locations and managers, constantly on voicemail. And I decided, that was actually before there was all these laws about being on your phone.
Right.
And so I decided, okay, let me put my phone down and I'm just going to listen to music. I never listen to music in my car because I'm always multitasking and trying to work. And so I played the radio for the first time in years, and there was Kelly Clarkson's Breakaway was on the radio.
I love her. I just love Kelly Clarkson.
Yes. And the song was so fitting for where I was at in my life, like just clawing my way to the top and miserable. And so I start kind of like scream crying, like, break away. I'm going to spread my wings, And what dawned on me in that moment was that I had not even afforded myself simple pleasures or joyful experiences, like listening to music. Like the things that actually lit me up were so far out of my consciousness at that point, because I was completely enveloped by what I thought I should do and what achievement meant and what status meant and how that correlated with my worth. So I'll never forget this. I had, false lashes kind of like falling down my face, and I looked like the Joker. And I go into my house at the time, and, my husband's like, oh my God, what happened to you? And I kind of held my fingers up like I was making a pinching sort of gesture and I said, I am this close to completely losing who I am.
Mm.
And that was truly the genesis for me of digging into what you talk about a lot with this inner voice, right? Like I didn't even realize that was a thing.
Yeah.
I just looked at external stimuli, like, oh, that's how you get promoted. Oh, that's what a good artist does. Oh, okay. Oh, that's the box you check. Oh, okay. That must lead to joy. And that began a complete journey that I've been on for well over a decade now and continue to be on, as I'm sure you know.
Oh
you
my
don't
gosh.
ever really
Yep.
stop.
Mm-hmm. So this is so fascinating to me. And gosh, I brought up about 40 more questions, but I'm going to go with this one first. When it comes to accomplishments, because I have a really similar story, only it wasn't that I was using accomplishments in seeking specifically joy. I mean, I think the undertone was I wanted to be happy, but for me, it was about feeling good enough. Oh, when I do this and this and this and this, then I'm going to feel like I'm enough. Then I'm going to feel worthy, right? And I think that that's it. It's sort of this pattern. We see these external accomplishments as the path to that place where we want to be. And I'm so fascinated by why. Why do we think that that is going to work?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you why.
Great. I knew I was asking the right person.
I'm so glad you asked, Kelly. Well, because I do a lot of study around our human evolution, around brain science and things like that. So we know that, I mean, even if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, one of our primary needs as a human species that translates all races, all sexes, all origins, all genders, all of that, is a sense of belonging. And where this is rooted in is from primitive man, where if you did not belong to a tribe or to some sort of social construct, it meant death. I mean, it literally meant impending death.
Right.
So now we flash forward and we look at this innate yearning to be accepted. What's under all of that is our subconscious kind of lizard brain telling us that we need that person's approval for survival, or we have to attain these things to look socially acceptable or viable or be a worthy contender in our society. So it's extremely primitive. So underneath all of that, when we really want our mom to approve of our parenting decisions, or when we really want to be accepted into this master's program, what that all is rooted in is if I don't get this, subconsciously, we think that it will mean our demise in some way. Now, I know that sounds ridiculously hyperbolic and over the top. And that's, again, why it's subconscious, because our conscious mind doesn't think that. Right? We're like, no. I really have to get into this master's program. Or I really need my mom to see it my way. We don't realize that what's happening is on a fundamental psychological level, we're actually concerned about our survival. So when you know that, the reason why that's actually even important at all to know is so that you can understand and be compassionate to yourself. No wonder I want to be accepted. No wonder I want people's approval. No wonder I want to feel valid and worthy and all of the, no wonder, right? It's the same with our fear response. That was designed to keep us alive.
Yeah.
And now
it's
we
a
feel
safety
it.
thing. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Completely.
Well, so how do we start to retrain? Because that's really what this is about, right? It's about retraining our mind consciously and then through conscious training subconsciously, right? To think in a different way, to see these things in a different way. I mean, how the heck do we do that?
Wow, that's a great question. And I have a little tool that I would love to share that has its root in our emotions. So as we've talked about, our pursuit of feeling good, and we could put whatever synonym we want in there. I also would argue that the desire to feel good enough, the desire to feel worthy or valid or deserving, I find those all to be fairly synonymous. We just have different verbiage around it. But what we think that will give us is happiness. That's what we think it will then feel awesome. right?
Yeah.
So it also makes sense that our emotions would be an incredible vehicle to start telling us what is actually going on for us. But we usually don't do that. We usually react, especially to uncomfortable emotions. So one of my favorite tools is an acronym, and it's N.A.C, NAC. And it's kind of an entry point or a way to size up what is happening for you emotionally. So if you are massively talking shit to yourself about not being valuable, if you are extremely worried about not being able to pay a bill, if you're concerned about your child, if you are embarrassed at a work function, whatever uncomfortable emotion you are feeling, the N stands for notice and name. Like, notice it and name it. What is it that I'm feeling? And if you don't know, you can simply say, I'm uncomfortable. I'm not sure what this is. I don't know if this is fear. I don't know if this is shame. I don't know if I'm just down and depressed. I don't know what's happening here. But in order to not just react to it, we have to acknowledge what is actually happening. Because our emotions are just messaging. They're just like, hey, Amy, I need you to pay attention to this real quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I just want to point out, I think that this is so important, just the noticing and naming, because oftentimes what happens is we have these emotions and then it becomes something bad, right? We're ashamed of that, or we feel like we shouldn't be having those emotions. And so we deny them, we stuff them down, or they come out in a different way. We don't acknowledge them, we don't accept them, and we don't process them. And that's where we really start to get in trouble.
That's right. And, you know, to your personal story of, wait a minute, I can't compete anymore. I can't do exercise anymore. I can't, you know, and so you might have that sadness or that despondence, and you make it mean I'm not valuable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not worthy. I'm not enough. Right?
Yeah.
Instead of unpacking it and actually really looking at what is underneath this emotion and dissecting it a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what leads you to the second letter, which is A, and it stands for ask. And it is simply to ask yourself, what is fueling this emotion? What is this really, really about, right? So it could be something like you just find out that your partner did not pay a bill they promised they were going to pay, and you were furious. And so on the surface level, you go, I am so angry. I can't believe they didn't do this. It's going to set us back. Rah, 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 rah. And then when you look at it a little bit deeper, what is really fueling this emotion? What is really behind this? It's, you know what? I don't feel respected in this marriage. I don't feel like what I care about is even valid. And so you can kind of look underneath it, because there's always the presenting issue and then there's the real issue.
Yeah, for sure.
And then C just stands for choose. And this is twofold. This is choosing how you want to behave and how you want to speak to yourself. Mm. So it could be a situation, you know, with the example that I just gave, you might choose to have a tough conversation with your partner about the state of your marriage, right? And then you might also choose how you want to speak to yourself in your mind, your inner voice, right? Like, you are going to fuel yourself with more empowering inner conversation, which is truly an art that we're never going to be done with. Like, it's just continually evolving and changing. So yeah, noticing what is happening for you emotionally, asking yourself what is behind this, and then really choosing powerful behavior. I mean, we see all the time, like, you could notice that you're really fearful, and then you could choose to act from a place of fear, or you could act from a place of courage, right?
Yeah. Yeah. This is really good. And even as you say this, I'm thinking to myself, oh, this would be great to help my kids recognize this too. You know, yes. So for all of you parents out there, you can really apply this to the people that you love also, and sort of help kids learn how to process these emotions. But you got to be able to do it yourself to
Absolutely.
Set that example. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate it. So going back to your story about how you realized you hadn't even been allowing yourself the small pleasures of life. Yeah. How did you begin to rediscover what brings you joy? Because I think it's probably fair to say that a lot of people don't really know.
That's right. That's right. Oh my goodness. Is that ever common? Well, at that time, I really thought that it was the solution was in a more fulfilling career path. And that was really what I was in hot pursuit of. What I did not count on was when I started getting involved in personal development and taking all sorts of courses and conferences and coach trainings and all of these things. I thought it was in service of me gathering a bunch of skills so that I could impart all that wisdom on other people. And what I didn't anticipate was getting cracked wide open myself. Mm-hmm. And that's when I really started contending with this idea of having an inner voice, and that sometimes it's from intuition and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's, our ego or coming from a place of survival or that, so really parsing that apart to see what I really wanted to listen to. That was kind of a, whoa, sky is opening up. I couldn't believe that everything that I said in my mind wasn't just naturally true.
I know. That was a biggie for me too. Like when I was like, oh, that doesn't have to be true. It was like this, eye-opening experience of like, oh my gosh, what have I been doing up to this point? It was really a moment of like a come to Jesus moment. Like,
totally.
Oh, I don't have to believe everything that runs through my head. And I love this idea of teaching yourself how to discern between those two voices, the true inner voice that's always loving, that always says you are enough, that always has a place of action for you that is going to feel fulfilling and be for you, not for someone else. Or I call it the inner mean girl voice. Yep. But it's that voice in our head that just beats us up.
Yeah.
So you started to figure out how to discern between those, and then what?
Well, I was still very much looking for this next chapter of my career path. So instead of looking at, okay, what is it? I started tallying what actually did bring me joy. What are the things in my current workplace that I already know? So just as you mentioned, there are people who just don't know, right? But I find that when we get locked into this idea of, I don't know who I am, I don't know what I like anymore, we just spiral out and we're not resourceful, we're not creative. So what I would encourage people to do is to start with your no-brainers, because I just had this conversation with a student of mine yesterday, and she was in this place of like, everything's a lie. Everybody who's told me anything about what I'm supposed to believe, oh my God. And so I said, okay, let's take a step back. And I want you to write a list of all of the things that you actually do know for sure, right? And so you might know that you love being involved in creative endeavors. What type of creativity? I might be painting murals. It might be knitting. You don't know, but you enjoy creating things, right? It could be, I really, truly love being in nature. I love caretaking. Or, because a lot of times wherever it hurts, like if we don't know what our next career is, let's say, we're so focused on how shitty we are in that area, instead of looking at all of these other things that we actually do have access to. We're just putting this blanket over everything of like, I don't know who I am. No, you do. You do. It's about switching the focus. So at that time, I started gathering, here are the components that I already do know that lights Amy up. Right? And I started just taking sort of an inventory of them and kind of reverse engineering it, so to speak. And I would take the things that I hated and that pissed me off, and I started looking at what are the opposites to that, because that could be the antithesis and actually infuse joy. So I started looking at it through the lens of this career path, right? And I started going, okay, I know I really, really do not like working for somebody else. I want to call the shots. So, okay, I want some sort of career where I'm the boss. Had no idea what that was. I know that I love teaching. I love being in front of people. I love speaking. I was doing a lot of that. I just didn't want to talk about makeup anymore. I had no idea what I wanted to talk about, but I knew that was an element that brought me joy. I knew I needed to be involved in something creative. I knew that I wanted autonomy and freedom for like holidays and weekends off and things like that. So slowly but surely, I started really noting the things that I already knew brought me joy instead of being so hyper focused of what's my next career, right? And we can do this in any area of our life. You know, we're so like, oh my God, I got to figure out a new workout program. Instead of going like, well, what do you know? Do you love getting up early? Do you like doing things as a night owl? Do you like working with a big group of people? Would you want like accountability of a workout class or like a hiking group? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we don't approach our problems from a place of what we already know brings us joy.
Mm-hmm. I love that so much. And you know, the other thing that keeps coming to mind for me too is that sometimes we carry stories about what we should and shouldn't love. So here's a perfect example. When I was growing up, my mom would always complain about cooking dinner. Like, oh, I've got to cook dinner. It must be nice to be your dad. He just comes home from work and there's dinner on the table. And she's like really resentful. And lately, I have found myself taking on that. And last week, I had some extra time and I was able to like cook for my family the way I love to cook for my family. And I realized, oh, wait a minute. I actually really do love this. Like, and I think what I realized was when I wasn't doing it, the feeling that I had of missing that, I translated that into resentment over feeling like I had to do it, which was a totally turned around way to think of it. And I was bringing that from my mom. And so just that realization of like, oh my gosh, I love cooking for my family. And this is something that when I don't have time for it, I miss it. So how can I create time? How can I make this a priority for myself? Because it's not a chore for me. It's not something I resent, even though my mom did. And I feel like so much of what we bring into this, like we carry these stories of like, what's okay? Like, is it okay to not like nature?
Right.
You know what I mean? Is it okay that I really don't want to go outside today? And that's okay.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. And this actually comes very much full circle to external influence, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm totally an indoor girl, not the biggest fan of the outside. I've been with my partner for 22 years and we absolutely do not want kids. That was extremely challenging to go through dealing with external influence. I mean, there's so much racket around that. Like I am this total free spirit, but I'm extremely structured and I hate spontaneity. It stresses me out. But what is spontaneous? In the eyes of the world, I always thought that's sexy. That's attractive. That you can't be a free spirit and not be spontaneous, right? It's these shoulds and these stories, like you said, and putting yourself in boxes. And it's not until you really listen to that internal voice that is it's usually a whisper, right?
Totally.
It's usually like, Kelly, you're allowed to like it. You're allowed to like to cook. Look how good you are, you know?
Yeah.
But we usually listen to this screaming negative voice of like, you're going to end up like your mom and, you know, all of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, and it's so fascinating to me because like coming back to, like you said, to this idea of external influence, how we get sucked into the idea that if we make everyone else happy first, we will be happy.
Right.
And it's so backwards. Like it's so opposite to how I believe life really works. And that is, we have to start first with us.
Yes.
How do we make ourselves that priority?
Wow. Well, how much time do you have?
I know, right? Well, and I think I'm so glad you said that because I want my listeners to know this is a choice you make day after day after day.
That's right.
You don't make it one time and you're like, oh, I love myself. I'm good. You know, you work on it.
Right. Oh, absolutely. It's a spiritual practice, right? And I don't say that in a woo-woo term. I mean it literally. Like if we talk about our human capacity, right? Like of or related to spirit. We have to listen to our soul, right? There's no place we can find in our body that governs us and gives us direction about our emotions or how things feel or all of that. And that is a lifelong practice. And I would say also really commend yourself, because even if you're listening to this podcast, you're already infusing yourself with messages that you do want to attach to.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, give yourself the permission to take some serious baby steps. It might be just committing to listening to a motivational or self-help personal development podcast once a week. It might be going on a retreat. It might be hiring a coach or digging into therapy if you know you have some historical issues. All of that stuff is catapulting your journey to keep uncovering and discovering what's really there for you. But it can be as simple as reading a daily meditation, or it could be as involved as going on a retreat. But you get to decide what the step is for you. And all it is consistency. That's it.
Mm-hmm. And your consistency doesn't have to be the same thing every day either.
That's right.
Because I think sometimes we get, especially if you're the kind of person that we're talking about, like perfectionist, overachiever, everything has to be like all your ducks in a row. You feel like it has to look a certain way. And there's definitely freedom in the practice.
That's right.
What does your practice look like?
You know, I have a little, there's a handful of things. I'm huge on the idea of maintenance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's something that I try to maintain in my world in a way that honors how I operate best. How I operate best is ritual, structure, scheduling. So one of the bigger picture items that I always make sure is in my life is I always have a coach. And that gives me something tangible on my calendar that I know I have a place to work through my shit with somebody. And it's built into my life as a habit.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I do daily is sort of a morning ritual. And I do a very short meditation before I even get out of bed, like a guided meditation with my headphones on. And then I do a short journaling procedure that's mostly about gratitude and my desired emotions for the day and what I want to manifest in my world, things like that. And I'm not flawless at it. I don't get to it every single day, but I really set up sort of these items that I know always make me feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And before I journal, I set up a little bit of music and I set up incense. I burn it every day. And then after that, I do like a little goddess card reading. So I tap into a bunch of woo-woo stuff. And it's really about a precursor to my day. Like how do I want to show up in the world? And I can really tell a difference between the days that I do it and the days that I don't do it. So, and it's not about perfection and it's not about, oh my God, you failed because you didn't do it. It's look at this addition that I have to my day. So even that is a perspective for me.
Totally. Ours are very similar, the journaling and the meditation. And I agree that I think too, if you create the intention of connecting with that inner voice that you know that you have on the days that are amiss with the morning for whatever reason, you still know all it takes is a single breath to reconnect. If you know what that inner voice sounds like, it's there for you. You don't have to go searching for it every single time. You just connect. And so it really allows for grace in imperfection. Oh, so good. Amy, this is fantastic. I have a question for you that I ask all of my guests, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about this. And that is, what is your inner voice saying to you or asking of you in your life currently?
I think probably one of the biggest, but gosh, there's so many. It's that committee in my head, you know. There's definitely been a pull to complete a book that I've been writing for about 5 years. And I've had all of these incredible, noble reasons why I can't finish my book proposal. And so I finally created a self-imposed deadline to have a proposal ready for an editor who's going to help me with it by April 1st. And a lot of that's hoop jumping and, just the way in which publishing world works and all of that. But underneath it all, what was really forcefully being like shouted to me from that inner knowing is you have got to get this message out to more people. You have to, almost from a place of like, it's negligent for you to keep this in any longer. You have got to get it out. And you cannot keep saying that everything else is paramount. You have to make it important. And so that's been a huge piece on the work front. On a personal front, oh my God, Kelly, every day with these damn goddess cards that I've been drawing, it's been like, get outside. It's been telling me to get outside and to purify. And so I know that there is a pull, not just from this, not from the cards, right? It's the messaging we decide to impose on the cards. But there is a toxicity in what I'm consuming, in not being able to be as active, not essentially becoming just work. And that I really need to start nurturing some of those components outside of that, particularly in the realm of health. So those two, I think, are pretty big.
I love those two. And you know what I find interesting about how you even describe them is earlier you said you're a free spirit who thrives on routine and structure. And so I think just that you hear that call for the book and then okay, in order for that to happen in my life, I need to set a deadline. I need to get myself help with an editor. Like you understand about what you need to be able to take the action and what your inner voice is saying. So I just want to highlight that for our listeners, because a lot of it is just about knowing what you need and knowing who you are. And that's what we're talking about today.
That's right.
So, Amy, why don't you let everyone know how they can find you and what goodies you have on your website? I know you have a couple of things that look like a lot of fun and really useful as well.
Sure. So a lot of what I talk about in my work is how we grapple with that external force. Like, how do we, if we now believe or are nurturing the belief that we are valid and we are worthy and we are enough, how does that affect our relationships? Specifically, how do we say no? Like, how do you tell your family, no, I'm not hosting Christmas, even though you've always done it, and deal with the repercussion? So it's a lot about the communication. Like, how do you have tact and eloquence and still find your voice and establish boundaries and let go of people pleasing and all of those things? So I created an ebook, which is completely free. It's essentially a workbook. And you can also get it in audiobook form if you prefer to consume it that way. And it's just called Stand Up for Yourself Without Being a Dick. And it's 9 different practices or challenges that you can employ to help catapult your self-love and your self-worth. And they can all be done kind of a la carte, but it's really I really love taking personal development concepts and making them applicable and tangible. What are my steps? How do I know if I'm actually doing this? Right.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's available for anybody. If you go to thejoyjunkie.com, you will see it right there available for you. And that would be another great thing that we were talking about earlier, as far as having small little steps that you can do to start embracing your joy and finding more about what matters to you and who you really are in this world. And I do a podcast as well. My husband is my sidekick. We've been doing it for about 5 years, and you can find all about that on that site as well. So
we'll put links to all of that in the show notes and in the notes of the podcast app that you're using. So you can find all of that and click right through from your phone.
Awesome.
So Amy, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited. And I just want to acknowledge and honor you. From the moment that I heard your voice, I was filled with energy and joy. And I thank you for bringing that into my life today. I needed it. My kids are home on a snow day.
Oh, the snow day.
And, I feel energized just by being with you. So thank you for being here. Thank you for having the courage to share what you share. And thank you for encouraging all of us to really go out and find our own joy.
Oh, you are most welcome. I am going to be riding high on that comment all day.
Fantastic.
You are most welcome.
Fantastic. And we will certainly talk soon. Oh, it was just so good. It was so good. I'm still flying high off of just this idea of being addicted to finding our own joy, to creating our own joy, to being the source of our own joy. I mean, think of the freedom that we would have if we let go of depending on other people and other situations to bring us joy. Because we can't control other people. We can only control ourselves. And then when we become the source of our own joy, when we are intentionally and deliberately finding things and doing things that bring us joy, then we become that source. So I really just want to encourage you guys to take this by the teeth, like to just dive in and make that list of no-brainers that Amy was talking about. What are the no-brainer things that bring you joy? And how can you have more of that in your life? So for me, it's making the time to cook for my family. It's playing music that makes me happy. It's snuggling with my dog. It's reading the most ridiculous, stupid romance that I can find. That brings me joy. It totally does. It's laughing with my girlfriends. It's going to work out. What are the no-brainers on your list? And if you need to, write them down and put them where you can see them every single morning and set an intention to be the source of your joy today. Ah, so good. So good. And you know what else? I just want to point out what Amy said about her own spiritual practice of loving herself. What that looks like for her as a coach is she has a coach. And I think this is really important to point out. Coaches can support you in this. They can hold the space for you to understand who you are. Coaches help ask the questions that bring you into a place where you can connect with your inner voice. That is what I love doing. When I sit down with one of my clients, that is my intention. To create a space where you begin to understand what you need in your life, what brings you joy, what your vision looks like, what the next steps are for you, how to feel fulfilled and successful in your real life. That's what I do. And remember that March is all about discovery and activation. If you are really feeling a pull towards understanding what it's like to work with a coach, maybe you've never worked with a coach and you think, oh, I'd love to know what that's like, but I don't know if it's for me. I don't know if I can afford it. Those are all valid questions that will never be answered if you don't reach out, if you don't take that first step to activate that desire, right? Take the first step. And what can the first step look like for you? Set up a free discovery call with me. This is no strings attached. We do a little bit of coaching so you get the feeling, that experience of what having a coach can bring into your life. And then I'll let you know what it looks like. We can decide if it's going to be a good fit. And it might be and it might not be, and that's totally fine. Because what we can both walk away with, no matter what, is having spent 20 minutes deeply connecting. And that's always going to bring us joy. So if this is something that you are ready to activate, I encourage you to do it. Head on over to kellycovert.com/discovery, and you can sign up for your free discovery call today. And you know what? There's a link right in your podcast app that you can click on and go there right now. So don't wait. Do it now if you're feeling a pull. As always, I want to remind you that you matter. Guess what? You deserve to live a life of joy. And you know why? Because you're alive. Not because you've done anything special or not because you haven't done anything special, right? You deserve it because you are breathing. And I want you to take that and I want you to hold on to it. And when you feel like, oh, I don't know, I need to make other people happy first, remember that you are worthy.